The sun hung low over the dusty town of Red Creek, casting long, golden shadows across the wooden buildings and unpaved streets. The air smelled of dry earth, leather, and smoke drifting from the chimneys of small cabins and saloons. Birds perched on the roof of the general store, chirping lazily, as if even they were slowing down under the heavy heat of the late afternoon. The town itself was small, only a few dozen people, but it had a life of its own. Horse hooves clattered on the streets, doors creaked as townsfolk moved about, and the distant bark of a dog could be heard near the outskirts. Into this quiet yet busy scene came a young woman named Clara. She had arrived in Red Creek only a few days ago, seeking a fresh start. Her life until now had been sheltered and predictable, spent in the confines of a small house in a nearby city under the careful watch of her family. But Clara wanted freedom, adventure, and the chance to see the world as it truly was. She had packed her few belongings on a small horse-drawn cart and set off toward the frontier, guided by determination and curiosity. Clara's presence immediately caught the eye of several townsfolk. Her dresses, though simple, were clean and well kept, and her hair, the color of honey in the sunlight, framed her face in loose waves. There was something about her that radiated both innocence and quiet strength, a combination that was unusual in Red Creek. The children gawked at her as she passed, whispering excitedly to each other, while older residents offered polite nods or quick smiles. Clara, however, barely noticed. She was too busy taking in every detail of the new town, the wooden signs swaying in the wind, the shopkeepers calling out their wares, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery mixing with the tang of livestock from the corral nearby. As she walked toward the center of town, Clara's eyes fell on a figure leaning against the railing of the general store porch. He was a man of middle age, tall and broad-shouldered, with weathered skin that told stories of many years spent under the sun. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and his deep-set eyes held a calm, thoughtful intensity. He wore a simple shirt tucked into worn trousers, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face. A leather belt held a revolver at his side, but it seemed more a part of his attire than a symbol of threat. This was the cowboy, a man who had earned respect in Red Creek not only for his skill with horses and cattle but for his quiet, dependable nature. Their first encounter was entirely accidental. Clara, carrying a basket of goods she had just purchased at the market, turned a corner too quickly. Not noticing the cowboy coming the other way, she collided with him gently but firmly, and the basket tipped, sending a few apples rolling across the dirt street. Clara gasped and bent down to gather them, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said, looking up at him. The cowboy crouched slightly, picking up an apple as well. He studied her carefully, his expression calm but with a hint of amusement. "No harm done," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You've got a quick step for a newcomer." Clara smiled nervously, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I'm still getting used to the town. Everything's so different from home." He nodded, handing her the apples. His hands were strong and steady, the kind of hands that had worked hard for years. Yet there was a gentleness in the way he offered them to her. "Red Creek's not for everyone," he said, "but if you're looking for adventure, I'd say you've come to the right place." Clara felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of excitement and curiosity. There was something about him that felt safe yet thrilling, a combination that both surprised and intrigued her. She thanked him, her eyes meeting his for a moment longer than necessary, and then hurried to pick up the rest of her groceries. Over the next few days, Clara and the cowboy's paths continued to cross. At first, it was small encounters passing each other on the street, exchanging polite greetings, or sharing a nod from across the market. But there was an unspoken recognition between them, a silent acknowledgement of something deeper that neither fully understood yet. The cowboy remained cautious, always polite but keeping a certain distance, while Clara found herself drawn to him, fascinated by the quiet strength he carried and the calm confidence in his every movement. One afternoon, as the town bustled with its usual energy, Clara found herself near the stables, curious about the animals she had never handled before. She had always loved horses but had never had much experience riding them. The cowboy appeared again, tending to a bay stallion with careful hands. He noticed her watching and raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "You've got an eye for horses," he remarked. "Ever ridden one?" Clara shook her head. "Only a little, and it didn't go very well," she admitted, laughing softly. "I guess I'm better at watching than doing," he chuckled, a low, warm sound that made her heart skip. "Watching is the first step. If you're brave enough, I could teach you." Clara hesitated, aware of the age difference, aware of the unspoken warnings that perhaps such a connection could be complicated. Yet something about his offer, the way he spoke with patience and understanding, made her trust him instinctively. "I'd like that," she said finally, her voice steady despite the nervous excitement bubbling inside her. And so began a slow, cautious friendship. They spent afternoons at the stables, with the cowboy showing her how to feed the horses, clean the stalls, and eventually ride. Clara was clumsy at first, often slipping in the saddle or startling the horses unintentionally, but the cowboy's calm guidance made her feel safe. He never scolded her, only encouraged her, his eyes always watchful but kind. In the evenings, Clara would wander through the town, often finding herself thinking of him. There was a warmth in his presence that lingered long after he had gone. Sometimes, she imagined what it would be like to share more than just friendship, to bridge the distance that his age and experience seemed to create. But she also understood his caution. He had warned her from the beginning that their paths might be different, that life in Red Creek was hard and unpredictable, and that age sometimes made love complicated. Despite this, there was a quiet tension between them, an unspoken bond that grew stronger each day. The cowboy found himself looking for her in the market, noticing her laughter and the way she moved with a blend of grace and determination. Clara, in turn, felt her admiration deepening into something more profound, a mixture of respect, attraction, and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara found herself near the river that ran at the edge of town. She watched the water glimmer and ripple, lost in thought, when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps behind her. The cowboy approached, his hat casting a shadow over his face, but his presence was reassuring. "You've been spending a lot of time here," he said, his voice calm. "Thinking about the town, or about life in general?" Clara smiled, feeling a sense of ease she hadn't known she would find. "Both, I guess. And about everything," she admitted. He nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Life can be unpredictable, especially out here. But it's also full of opportunities for courage, for friendship, and maybe even for something more. If you're willing to take the chance." Clara felt her heart skip. She wanted to ask him what he meant, to bridge the space between caution and desire, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded, feeling a quiet connection that needed no explanation. As they walked back toward town, side by side, the streets emptying and the sky darkening, Clara realized that her life in Red Creek had already begun to change. The dusty streets, the small wooden buildings, and the endless sky above held more than adventure. They held the promise of something new, something real. And standing beside her, the cowboy carried not just strength and experience, but a gentle invitation into a world she was only beginning to understand. By the time they reached the edge of town, Clara knew one thing clearly. She had entered a story she couldn't predict. A story that would challenge her, inspire her, and perhaps even change the course of her life forever. And though the cowboy had told her she was too young, she couldn't help but feel that the connection they shared was something neither time nor caution could easily diminish. Days in Red Creek began to blend together for Clara, each one carrying a rhythm of work, exploration, and quiet observation. She rose with the sun, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold, and wandered the dusty streets, always curious to see what the town had to offer. Clara had settled into a modest boarding house run by a kind widow named Mrs. Harris, who treated her like a daughter she never had. The rooms were simple, with wooden floors and small windows, but Clara found comfort in the warm hearths and the smell of fresh bread in the morning. She continued spending time at the stables, where the cowboy, whose name she now knew as James, taught her not only about horses but also about the life of a man who had spent decades taming the Wild West. James was patient, never losing his temper when Clara struggled to saddle a horse or calm a skittish foal. He had a way of speaking softly but firmly, guiding her hands and correcting her posture with quiet confidence. Watching him, Clara could see the years etched into his face, the experience that gave him strength and wisdom. And yet, there was a gentleness in his gaze, a warmth that made her feel safe even in moments of uncertainty. The more time they spent together, the more Clara noticed the little things about him, the way he would pause to listen to the wind through the trees, or how he treated every animal with respect, never using force unless necessary. She admired how he seemed to understand people as well, sensing moods and intentions without a word being spoken. It was a rare quality, and it made Clara feel drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. Their conversations began to stretch beyond horses and chores. James shared stories of his life on the frontier, tales of long rides across the plains, of storms weathered, and dangers narrowly avoided. He spoke of the challenges of living in a town where law and order were often fragile, and of the friends he had lost to accidents or misfortune. Clara listened, captivated, her eyes wide as he painted pictures of the wide-open land, of nights under stars so bright they could blind, and of rivers so swift and strong that they demanded respect. In turn, Clara shared her own experiences. Though her life had been far less adventurous, she spoke of her childhood in the city, of her longing for freedom, and of the dreams that had brought her to Red Creek. James listened attentively, never interrupting, nodding when appropriate, and occasionally smiling in a way that made her heart flutter. It was during these talks that Clara began to realize just how different they were, not only in age but in life experience. And yet, despite the differences, there was a connection that seemed to grow stronger with every shared story and every quiet moment spent in each other's company. One afternoon, while helping James repair a fence at the edge of town, Clara felt a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness. The sun was high, beating down on their backs, and the horses grazed lazily nearby. As she hammered a loose post into place, James walked over, his presence steadying her. "You've got a knack for this," he said, watching her work. "I didn't think you'd be so quick to learn." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I guess I've always liked trying new things," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "Even if I fail at first." James chuckled, a low sound that made her glance at him, and she caught the way his eyes softened as he watched her. There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither spoke, only the wind rustling through the grass and the distant sound of a bell from the town square filling the air. Clara felt her heartbeat quicken, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She wanted to say something, to reach across the invisible line between friendship and something more, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded and returned to her work, feeling the electricity of the moment linger. The bond between them grew not just in quiet moments but also in small acts of trust and cooperation. James showed Clara how to ride across uneven terrain, teaching her to sense the rhythm of the horse and to move with its strength. At first, Clara struggled, her confidence faltering as the horse jolted or stumbled. But James never scolded. He simply guided her, his hand on her shoulder or his voice calm and reassuring. With every ride, Clara's confidence grew, and so did her admiration for James. She began to see him not just as a mentor or protector, but as someone she could rely on in ways that went far beyond practical skills. Despite their growing closeness, there were moments when James pulled back, a subtle hesitation in his eyes, or a careful choice of words that reminded Clara of the age gap between them. He was courteous and kind, but he never let their interactions cross the line. "You're young," he had said once, "and life is long. Don't rush into things you might regret." Clara respected his caution, even if it made her heart ache. She understood that love was not simply about desire, but about timing, judgment, and readiness. Red Creek itself seemed to test them, presenting challenges that brought them together in unexpected ways. One day, a group of horses ran loose after a startled herd broke through a gate, and chaos erupted in the town square. Clara watched in horror as townsfolk scrambled to catch the animals. Without thinking, She ran toward the nearest runaway horse, trying to calm it while James coordinated the efforts. Her courage surprised even herself, and James could not help but notice her determination. Together, they managed to round up the horses, saving the animals and preventing damage to the town. Afterward, as they leaned against a fence, catching their breath, James looked at her differently. There was admiration in his eyes, a quiet respect that went deeper than their shared adventures. "You've got guts," he said simply. "Not many would have done what you did." Clara felt a surge of pride and gratitude, knowing that in that moment, they had faced a challenge as equals. Evenings were the times when their connection deepened most profoundly. Often, they would sit near the stables, watching the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet. James would share more stories, some funny, some somber, and Clara would listen, her imagination bringing his words to life. She learned of the loneliness that often accompanied his life as a cowboy, the nights spent under stars with no one to share thoughts with, and the small joys he found in moments of peace. Clara, in turn, shared her hopes for the future, her desire to explore, and her longing to find a place where she truly belonged. Through these exchanges, the lines between friendship and something more began to blur. Clara found herself thinking of James constantly, noticing small gestures, the tilt of his head when he spoke, the warmth of his hand when guiding her on a horse, the softness in his eyes when he looked at her. She was careful not to push too far, understanding the caution he had expressed from the beginning, but the pull of her feelings was undeniable. One evening, after a long day of work and practice at the stables, James offered to walk her back to the boarding house. The streets were quiet, the last rays of sunlight fading into twilight. Clara felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and excitement as they walked side by side, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty street. They spoke little, content in the shared silence, the comfort of each other's presence stronger than words. At the edge of the boarding house, Clara turned to him, her heart pounding. "Thank you, James," she said softly, "for everything, for your patience, and for teaching me." James smiled, tipping his hat slightly. "You've done all the hard work yourself," he replied. "I just showed you the way." There was a pause, a moment that stretched longer than either expected, filled with unspoken feelings and quiet understanding. Clara's eyes met his, and for a brief second, the age difference, the cautions, and the warnings faded into the background. That night, as Clara lay in her modest room, she thought about James and the strange, wonderful connection they shared. She knew their friendship was unusual, perhaps even complicated, but she couldn't deny the warmth it brought her. She realized that the Wild West was teaching her more than just survival or practical skills. It was teaching her about trust, courage, and the power of a bond that transcended simple explanations. And though James had warned her about the age gap, Clara felt a quiet certainty that their story was just beginning, that there was more to discover, more to learn, and perhaps even more to feel. The adventure of Red Creek was no longer just about the town or the land. It was about the connection she had found, the lessons she was learning, and the quiet, steady pull of a man who had become more than just a guide. In that moment, Clara understood that life in Red Creek would never be the same again. She had stepped into a world that challenged her, inspired her, and offered her a chance to grow. And standing beside James, even in moments of distance or caution, she felt a sense of belonging and excitement that promised more than she could yet imagine. Life in Red Creek carried on with its usual rhythm, but the town's calm was fragile, like dust on the wind waiting to be stirred. Clara had grown more confident in her skills, riding and caring for horses, and her bond with James had strengthened. Yet, the Wild West was never truly predictable, and challenges often arrived without warning. One morning, a commotion at the edge of town signaled trouble. A group of cattle rustlers had appeared, seeking to steal from the local ranchers. Their sudden presence threw the town into chaos, and Clara watched with apprehension as townsfolk hurried to protect their livestock. James was already moving, his calm confidence giving him an almost magnetic authority. Clara instinctively followed, though her heart pounded with nervous energy. She realized that the quiet town she had begun to call home could become dangerous in an instant. As they approached the scene, she saw James taking charge, directing others to secure the fences and corral the animals. His voice was steady, calm, and commanding, cutting through the panic. Clara felt a sense of awe at his ability to act decisively, even when others were frantic. Clara tried to help, but her lack of experience made her nervous. She had never been in a situation that demanded both quick thinking and courage. A frightened horse bolted nearby, and without thinking, Clara ran toward it, trying to calm the animal while keeping herself safe. James noticed immediately, his eyes narrowing with concern. He moved swiftly, guiding her to a safer position while still keeping the horse calm. Their teamwork was seamless, unspoken, and instinctive, as though they had faced such challenges together many times before. By the time the chaos settled, the cattle were safe, and the rustlers had fled, leaving the town unharmed but shaken. Clara's hands trembled, and her heart raced from the adrenaline of the experience. James placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying her. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly, his voice carrying both pride and admiration. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest, knowing she had met the challenge and impressed someone she respected deeply. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting the town in soft golden light, Clara and James walked toward the stables to check on the horses. The quiet after the day's events was almost surreal, the silence filled with the distant sounds of the town settling and the occasional call of a bird returning to its nest. Clara felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced danger, worked alongside James, and discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. James noticed her reflective mood and spoke softly. "The Wild West isn't always kind," he said, "but moments like these, they show who we are, how we can handle the unexpected." Clara nodded, understanding his meaning on a level deeper than the words themselves. She realized that their experiences together were shaping her, teaching her resilience, courage, and the importance of trust. And she trusted James, perhaps more than anyone she had ever met. Over the next few days, life in Red Creek returned to its familiar patterns. But Clara and James's bond grew stronger. They continued their lessons at the stables, rode across the plains, and spent quiet evenings sharing stories by the fire. Yet, beneath the surface, an unspoken tension lingered. Clara's admiration and affection for James had grown, and she sensed that he, too, felt a pull toward her. But the age difference, the warnings, and the responsibilities of life in the Wild West created an invisible barrier. One afternoon, Clara accompanied James to a neighboring ranch to help with repairs after the rustling incident. The journey was long, the sun high and hot, but Clara felt invigorated by the adventure. Riding side by side, she watched James expertly guide his horse, his posture confident and relaxed. She couldn't help but notice the subtle details, the way his eyes scanned the horizon, the calm control of his hands on the reins, the quiet strength he carried without arrogance. Clara felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of admiration and longing. But she reminded herself of the caution James had expressed from the start. At the ranch, they worked together to mend broken fences and reinforce the barns. Clara proved herself capable, handling tools and heavy wood with determination and care. James observed her closely, offering guidance when needed but allowing her space to act independently. He was patient, understanding that learning came with practice and mistakes. Clara appreciated his approach, feeling both challenged and supported. She realized that their partnership was more than just friendship. It was a bond built on mutual respect, trust, and shared effort. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Clara and James took a moment to rest. They sat on the fence, their shoulders nearly touching, and watched the cattle grazing in the distance. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken connection that had grown over weeks of shared experiences. Clara felt her heart swell with emotions she could not yet name. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between caution and desire, but she held back, respecting the boundaries that James had set. James broke the silence, his voice soft but deliberate. "You've grown stronger in the past weeks," he said. "Not just in riding or handling horses, but in facing challenges and standing your ground. I admire that. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and something deeper she dared not name. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've learned a lot, and I couldn't have done it without you." Their shared experiences continued to teach them about each other and about life in the Wild West. Clara discovered that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the courage to act despite it. James realized that the presence of someone young, spirited, and unafraid could bring a sense of renewal to his life, something he hadn't anticipated. Together, they navigated both physical and emotional challenges, their bond strengthening with each obstacle they overcame. One evening, a severe storm swept through Red Creek, bringing heavy rain, wind, and lightning. Clara and James were caught outside while checking the horses, and they sought shelter in a small shed. The storm raged around them, the wind howling and rain drumming on the roof. Clara felt a mixture of fear and excitement, clinging to the sense of safety James provided. He held her hand briefly, steadying her, and she felt a thrill of connection, a silent acknowledgement that they could face the world together. After the storm passed, the town emerged to assess the damage. Trees were down, fences were broken, and the streets were muddy and slick. Clara and James worked side by side, helping the townsfolk repair the damage. Their teamwork was seamless, a combination of skill, determination, and mutual respect. Clara began to see James not just as a mentor or protector, but as someone she could rely on in ways that transcended age or experience. As days turned into weeks, Clara realized that her feelings for James were growing stronger, though she still struggled with the knowledge of their differences. She admired his strength, his kindness, and his wisdom. But she also knew that the Wild West could be unforgiving, and that their bond had to navigate more than just emotion. It had to withstand reality. James, too, found himself drawn to Clara's courage, her curiosity, and her unwavering spirit. Yet he continued to exercise caution, aware that their connection, though deep, was complicated by the world around them. Despite these challenges, there were moments of pure joy. They rode through open fields at sunrise, raced horses across the plains, and laughed together over small mistakes or accidents. Clara discovered that the Wild West was not only about survival but also about finding moments of beauty, friendship, and connection in an often harsh and unpredictable land. And in these moments, she felt her heart opening to the possibility of something more, though she knew it would take time and patience. Through it all, Clara and James learned from each other. She taught him to see the world with fresh eyes, to notice the small joys that could be easily overlooked in a life of routine and responsibility. He taught her to navigate challenges with confidence, to act with both strength and care, and to trust in her own abilities. Together, they discovered a rhythm that balanced adventure and caution, passion and patience, independence and companionship. By the time the sun set on another day in Red Creek, Clara knew that her life had changed profoundly. She had faced danger, grown in skill and courage, and formed a bond with a man who had become a central part of her world. James, in turn, had come to appreciate Clara's presence, her spirit, and the quiet strength she brought into his life. Though neither of them could yet predict the path their relationship would take, they both sensed that something significant was unfolding, a connection that would shape their future in ways neither could ignore. Life in Red Creek had settled into a rhythm again, but Clara could feel something shifting between her and James. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a quiet smile, a soft tone in his voice that seemed to carry more meaning than he intended. She had grown used to the camaraderie, the lessons at the stables, and the shared moments under the wide, open sky. Yet lately, every interaction seemed charged with something deeper, something neither of them could fully name. James, too, felt the change. He had always been cautious, aware of the age difference and the responsibilities that came with his life. He had warned Clara from the start that their connection might be complicated, that her youth and inexperience could clash with the realities of life in the Wild West. And yet, he could no longer ignore the pull he felt toward her, the way his heart quickened when she laughed, the way he found himself seeking her presence, even when he had work to do. He was a man who trusted his instincts, and his instincts were telling him that Clara was not just a companion, but someone he cared for deeply. The turning point came one evening when Clara visited the general store to buy supplies for the stables. A sudden commotion outside drew her attention. Shouts and hurried footsteps echoed through the street. A stray herd of cattle had wandered into town, panicked and dangerous. Without thinking, Clara ran toward the chaos, determined to help. She moved with a courage that had become second nature to her. But she was still young, and the situation was unpredictable. James appeared beside her, his presence commanding and calm. He guided the townsfolk in securing the cattle, his voice cutting through the panic. Clara worked alongside him, her heart racing but her mind focused. Together, they managed to lead the animals back into the corral, their teamwork seamless and instinctive. Once the danger had passed, James looked at Clara, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before: admiration, relief, and an undeniable warmth. "You were brave today," he said quietly, his hand brushing hers as he handed her a rope. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine at the touch, and her pulse quickened. I just did what needed to be done," she replied, though her voice betrayed a hint of emotion. That night, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the events of the day. She sat by the window in her room at the boarding house, staring at the stars above Red Creek. Each one seemed to shine more brightly than the last, as if urging her to confront her feelings. She knew that she cared for James in a way that went beyond friendship, beyond admiration, and she suspected he felt the same, though his caution kept him from speaking openly. The next morning, she found him at the stables, tending to the horses with his usual calm efficiency. Clara approached, her heart pounding. "James," she began, unsure of how to start. "Can we talk?" He looked up, noticing the seriousness in her eyes. "Of course," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. They walked a short distance away from the horses, to a quiet spot where the morning sun cast gentle light across the ground. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her emotions pressing her to speak. I care about you," she said finally, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "More than I thought I could care for someone, and I think you feel the same." She paused, searching his face for a sign. A flicker of acknowledgement. James remained silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "Clara, you're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I've lived many years, seen too much to act without caution. I've tried to protect both of us from a mistake, from something we might regret." Clara stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. "But life isn't just about avoiding mistakes, James. It's about taking chances, about trusting what's real and true. I trust you. I trust us." For a long moment, he looked at her, the sun glinting off his hat and the dust settling around them. Then he let out a sigh, one that seemed to carry years of restraint and careful thought. He took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You've grown so much," he said softly. "Not just in courage, but in understanding. I don't want to hold back anymore." Clara's heart soared. She reached out, taking his hand in hers, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes: trust, connection, and the acknowledgement of the bond they had nurtured over weeks of shared experience. The next few days were filled with quiet, tender moments. They rode together at dawn, sharing stories and laughter as the world woke around them. They worked at the stables side by side, their movements synchronized, their understanding of each other growing deeper. Every glance, every touch, every word carried meaning, a reflection of the feelings they had kept hidden but could no longer deny. One evening, as the sky blushed with the colors of sunset, James took Clara to a secluded spot on a hill overlooking Red Creek. The town lay below them, peaceful and small, framed by rolling hills and the endless plains beyond. They sat together, the wind gently tugging at their hair, and for the first time, James spoke openly about his feelings. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but soft, "I've tried to resist this, Tried to remind myself of the differences between us. But I can't anymore. You've become a part of my life in ways I didn't expect. I care for you deeply. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Not of sadness, but of relief and joy. I care for you too, James, she whispered. And I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He reached for her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The moment was simple, quiet, and profound. In the fading light, with the wind carrying the scents of grass and earth, they allowed themselves to close the gap that had kept them apart. It was not rushed or impulsive, but a deliberate surrender to the feelings they had nurtured, a recognition that their connection was stronger than fear, caution, or societal expectations. That night, as they walked back to town under a blanket of stars, Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known. Life in the Wild West was unpredictable, often harsh, and sometimes dangerous. But in James's presence, she found a strength and safety that allowed her to face anything. And James, who had lived so long with caution and restraint, discovered a renewed sense of hope and joy in Clara's spirit. Their bond became a source of inspiration for both. Clara felt empowered, her confidence growing with every shared experience and quiet moment of connection. James found himself smiling more, laughing more, and opening his heart in ways he hadn't for years. Together, they navigated the challenges of Red Creek, their love becoming a quiet force that strengthened them both. Despite the town's gossip and the subtle judgments of some townsfolk, Clara and James were undeterred. They understood that their relationship was unconventional, but they also knew it was genuine. The Wild West had taught them lessons about courage, resilience, and trust, and they applied those lessons to their growing love. Every obstacle, every danger, every quiet evening under the stars reinforced the bond that had brought them together. As days turned into weeks, Clara and James settled into a rhythm that blended work, adventure, and moments of intimacy. They shared laughter and stories, faced challenges together, and found joy in simple pleasures. The warmth of the sun on their backs, the sound of horses' hooves on the dirt, the quiet beauty of a star-filled night. And through it all, they cherished the knowledge that they had chosen each other, fully and without reservation. By the end of this part of their journey, Clara knew that her surrender to James was not a loss of independence but an embrace of a partnership that made her stronger. She had found someone who respected her courage, admired her spirit, and offered a love that was both passionate and grounded. James, in turn, had discovered that love could still surprise, renew, and bring joy, even in the later years of life. Together, they were ready to face the Wild West, not as separate individuals, but as a team united by trust, respect, and the deep affection that had grown between them. After months of shared adventures, quiet moments, and tests of courage, Clara and James had settled into a life in Red Creek that felt both familiar and extraordinary. Their bond, forged in the challenges of the Wild West, had grown stronger with every passing day. Where once there had been hesitation, caution, and unspoken tension, now there was trust, mutual respect, and a love that neither age nor circumstance could diminish. Life in the town continued with its usual rhythm, and Clara found herself fully immersed. She had grown skilled at caring for the horses, riding across the plains, and helping the townsfolk with chores and tasks that once seemed daunting. But more than the work, she had found her place in the community, earning the respect of those who had initially been wary of the young newcomer. Her courage and determination during the cattle rustling incident and other small crises had shown everyone that she was capable, strong, and dependable. James, too, had changed in subtle but meaningful ways. His reserved nature had softened, replaced by a quiet joy that came from knowing he had someone by his side who understood him, challenged him, and inspired him. Clara's presence had brought a sense of renewal to his life, reminding him that even in a harsh and unpredictable land, love could flourish and bring hope. Together, they faced the challenges of Red Creek not just as individuals but as partners, ready to navigate whatever the frontier might throw at them. One morning, Clara awoke to the soft light of sunrise, filtering through the wooden blinds of her room. She stretched and stepped outside, the crisp air carrying the scents of the town, freshly baked bread, hay from the stables, and the earthy aroma of the plains beyond. James was already outside, preparing the horses for a ride. Seeing him there, confident and steady, Clara felt a surge of affection. She approached quietly, and he turned, offering her a smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and warm. "Ready for another adventure?" Clara laughed softly, feeling the ease of their companionship. "Always," she replied. They mounted their horses and rode together across the open plains, the wind tugging at their hair and the sun warming their backs. There was a freedom in these rides, a sense of connection to the land and to each other that made everything else fade away. They raced through fields, laughed at the occasional stumble, and paused at a stream to rest, letting the horses drink while they enjoyed a quiet moment together. As they rode back toward town, they encountered Mrs. Harris, who waved enthusiastically from the porch of her boarding house. She had been a mentor of sorts to Clara, offering guidance, warmth, and a sense of family that had been missing from her life. Seeing James and Clara together, she smiled knowingly, recognizing the depth of their bond. Clara waved back, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. Red Creek was no longer just a town to her. It was home, and James was a part of that home in ways that were profound and enduring. Over the next few weeks, Clara and James continued to navigate the routines and challenges of town life. They helped with the ranching work, tended to the horses, and assisted the townsfolk whenever needed. But they also made time for each other, quiet walks at sunset, shared meals at the small local diner, and evenings under the vast, starlit sky where they could talk about everything and nothing. Each moment was a reminder of how far they had come, how much they had grown individually and together, and how strong their connection had become. One evening, after a long day of work, they walked to a secluded hill overlooking Red Creek. The sky was painted with shades of pink, purple, and gold, and the town below glowed softly in the fading light. James took Clara's hand in his, and she leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his presence. "We've come a long way," he said quietly, his voice carrying a mix of pride and affection. "From the day we first met, to now. It feels like a lifetime of moments, all leading to this." Clara nodded, her eyes shining. "And I wouldn't change a single one," she replied. "Every challenge, every laugh, every quiet moment has brought us closer. I feel complete with you." James smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "I feel the same," he said. "Life out here can be unpredictable, harsh, and sometimes lonely. But with you by my side, I know we can face anything." Their love, now open and accepted, became a quiet inspiration for the town. While some townsfolk had initially been skeptical of their age difference and the unconventional nature of their bond, it was clear that Clara and James were committed to each other. Their actions spoke louder than gossip, acts of kindness, courage, and mutual support that demonstrated the strength of their relationship. People began to admire them, recognizing that true connection was not defined by age, but by trust, respect, and genuine affection. Spring turned to summer, and the town flourished. Clara and James continued to explore the surrounding plains, discovering hidden valleys, sparkling streams, and peaceful groves where they could escape the bustle of town life. They shared laughter and quiet contemplation, learning from each other and deepening their bond. Clara had become more confident, capable, and self-assured, while James had rediscovered joy, hope, and the simple happiness that came from sharing life with someone he loved. One day, the town held a small celebration to mark a successful harvest. The streets were filled with music, laughter, and the aroma of cooked meats and fresh bread. Clara and James joined the festivities, riding through the town on horseback and greeting friends and neighbors. Children waved excitedly, and townsfolk smiled warmly, many of them offering congratulations and good wishes. The event was a reminder of the community they had become a part of, and of the ways in which their love had become woven into the fabric of Red Creek. As the sun set and the festivities wound down, Clara and James found a quiet spot near the river. The water glimmered under the fading light, reflecting the colors of the sky. They sat together, their hands intertwined, and watched as fireflies danced along the riverbank. It was a peaceful, perfect moment, one that captured the essence of their journey, the challenges faced, the love discovered, and the life they had built together. "You know," Clara said softly, "I never imagined life could be like this. I thought the Wild West would be dangerous, lonely, but it's given me everything I needed. Adventure, courage, and you." James chuckled, a warm, low sound. "I feel the same. Life out here can be unpredictable, but it's also beautiful. And now, with you, it's even better." They leaned against each other, the quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a protective blanket. Clara realized that surrendering to this love had not been a loss but a gain, a choice to embrace connection, trust, and the joy of sharing life fully with someone who understood her. James, too, understood that opening his heart had brought a richness to life that he had not anticipated. As the stars appeared one by one in the vast sky above, Clara and James made a silent promise to face the future together, no matter what it held. They had already proven their courage, resilience, and strength as individuals and as a pair. The Wild West, with all its dangers and challenges, had only strengthened their bond, teaching them lessons about trust, love, and partnership that would last a lifetime. In the months that followed, Clara and James continued their life in Red Creek with a sense of purpose and joy. They helped the town prosper, assisted their neighbors, and nurtured the community that had embraced them both. Their love remained a steady force, guiding them through daily life and unexpected events alike. And every evening, as the sun set and the sky blazed with color, they would find a quiet moment to reflect on their journey from the first accidental meeting to the moment they had fully surrendered to their feelings. Their story became a quiet legend in Red Creek, a tale told by townsfolk of a young woman who arrived seeking adventure and an older cowboy who had lived a life of experience and caution. Together, they had discovered a love that defied expectations, a partnership built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. And though the Wild West was ever unpredictable, Clara and James faced it hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might bring. In the end, Clara understood that life's greatest adventures were not always about distance traveled or challenges overcome. They were about the people we choose to share our lives with, the connections we nurture, and the courage to embrace love when it calls. And James understood that opening his heart, despite caution and fear, had brought him joy and fulfillment beyond what he had ever imagined. Together, they stood as a testament to the enduring power of love in the Wild West, a love that grew stronger with every challenge, every shared moment, and every quiet evening under the endless sky. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had found a life full of adventure, companionship, and happiness that would carry them forward, side by side, for all the days to come.